All right, so welcome to our first YouTube review session. Today we're going to be reviewing for the Industrialism quiz. The Industrialism quiz is basically broken up into three parts. The first of which is the Industrialism in England. Why did the Industrial Revolution begin in England? So, how we're going to do this. We're going to go through a few questions for each part. And you can pause, after I've asked a question, you can pause, look up the answer, try to figure out your own answer, the same way we do in our regular review session, and then hit play again to learn the correct answers. Most of this is going to be where I will say it out loud, but if there's something super important, I will probably write it on the board. So please make sure you take notes. Okay, so the first question that I want to ask you is, under what conditions or what caused the Industrial Revolution to begin in England? So there are three major reasons for the Industrial Revolution beginning in England. Okay, so the first of this is natural resources. Okay, so when we're talking about natural resources, we're talking about the resources that are used in the actual production, as well as geographical locations and geographical formations that made it easy for England to industrialize. So when we're talking about those geographics, we're talking about rivers and harbors. Okay. So rivers were important for transportation and power. Harbors were important for transportation and trade. The whole purpose of industrialization is to make products faster. And when you make products faster, you want to be able to sell them. So you need access to the ocean in order to trade with foreign countries, and you're also going to need access to the rest of your country in order to move all of your important materials. Let's talk about those materials. You also have the resources coming out of the ground, and Great Britain had a lot of those. They had coal, iron, wool, cotton, and various other metals. Okay. So the coal, much like water, would be used for power. The wool and the cotton to make manufactured goods. And then the iron and the metals will be used to make your machinery. So natural resources was one of the factors that helped England industrialize. A second factor of the Industrial Revolution was labor. And as we talked about before, there are two kinds of labor. We have skilled and unskilled. When we're talking about skilled labor, we are talking about the inventors. We're talking about mechanics. These people had specific knowledge and education that would be useful in the Industrial Revolution. Specifically, we have inventors like Scott Kay, Arkwright, Cartwright, and the most important, Watt. Each of these inventors, Kay created the flying shuttle, Arkwright the water frame, Cartwright the power loom, and then Watt revolutionized the Industrial Revolution. Almost every invention after Watt was dependent on his invention, the steam engine. Mechanics were necessary in order to create these machines to build them, and also to fix them should they ever break down. And then you'll have the workers who are skilled in using them. So skilled machinists. And that meant that they knew how to work the actual more complex machines like the power loom and the steam engine. These are the skilled workers. Unskilled workers. All of these have some form of education. Unskilled workers didn't need any education really at all. And the majority of these came from farmers. Why were so many farmers all of a sudden out of work? This is a key term of yours, enclosures. The enclosures, big farmers, big investors, big landowners were starting to revolutionize farming. This was the agricultural revolution. Things like the seed drill and the plow were being used to make more food. When you have more food, you have a greater population. The population grows. In addition, since these big landowners were using all these agricultural machines, they didn't need farmers anymore. They also had enough money to buy out the smaller farmers. They would then enclose those farms into one huge farm, like a plantation. That meant that a lot of the farmers were out of work. They had to find a way to take care of their families, provide for their families. They needed a place to move because now they've sold their farm, they have nowhere to live. So they would move to the cities. When they moved to the cities, this act was called urbanization. Moving into the cities instead of in the country. So the second reason why Industrial Revolution began in England was that there were a lot of skilled workers who created inventions. They were able to build and fix these inventions and work the inventions. And then you also had a bunch of unskilled labor that was available due to the enclosures. Okay, that's the second reason, labor. So we've covered land, the natural resources, labor, and now let's talk about capital. Okay, so when we're talking about capital, it's a really complex issue. The reason why, well, capital, first of all, is wealth. Money to invest. Okay. When we're talking about the concept of the capital, why did Great Britain, why did England have so much extra cash? Well, there's a variety of reasons. One of the reasons why Great Britain had extra cash is because they weren't spending it in wars. So there was no war on British soil. No wars in Britain. Yes, they were involved in the American Revolution. Yes, they were involved fighting against Napoleon once Napoleon came to power. However, both of these wars were taking place not in Britain. The American Revolution took place in America, which meant America was in turmoil. There was destruction in America. The wars with Napoleon took place on the oceans. They also took place in Britain, Prussia, Russia, etc. Basically, not in England, not in Britain. So, since there was no war on British soil, you had people who were not losing jobs, not destroying property, etc., etc., etc. This meant they had money to invest. In addition, you guys remember talking about the British government. Who has the power to tax in Great Britain? That's right, Parliament has the power to tax. Parliament Parliament is elected. Granted, not everyone could vote. This is not a full democracy. It's an old oligarchy. Parliament was voted on by nobles, knights, and wealthy citizens. Okay. But that meant that the nobles, knights, and wealthy citizens, they didn't want to tax things that they were investing in. If they're putting the money into companies, they don't want to have to pay taxes to the government about those companies. So this equaled no high taxes on trade. All of this equated to money to invest. These are the major reasons for the Industrial Revolution beginning in Britain, in England.